Grok has never given a simple answer about the Sphinx, not once, not in any test run since it launched. Big mysteries like Stonehenge have been measured, dated, and mostly explained by now. The Sphinx hasn't, and the reason isn't bad data. It's something else entirely. Someone typed one question into Grok. Who actually built the Sphinx, and when? What came back? Wasn't a clean answer. It was a list of problems that historians still can't fully solve. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what Grok pointed to, and why researchers have been circling this same answer for 30 years. Let's start with the basics. The Sphinx sits on the Giza Plateau in Egypt, right next to the pyramids. It's carved from one giant piece of bedrock. It's about as long as a football field and taller than a 6-story building. Most textbooks say it was built around 2500 BC, during the reign of a pharaoh named Khafra. That's the accepted story. It's the one taught in almost every school. But here's the first problem. Weathering on the Sphinx's body doesn't match weathering you'd expect from a dry desert climate. Some researchers have pointed to deep, rounded erosion patterns that look more like they came from heavy rainfall. Egypt hasn't had rainfall like that in thousands of years. Not since long before Khafra was even born. That single detail cracked open a much bigger question. What if the accepted date is wrong? Not by a few decades, by thousands of years. This is where the sky comes in. The Sphinx faces due east. On the spring equinox, the sun rises directly in front of it. That part isn't controversial. Every Egyptologist agrees on it. What's controversial is what else lines up on that same morning. Because of a slow wobble in Earth's rotation called precession, the constellations that rise on the equinox shift over long stretches of time. It takes about 26,000 years for the whole cycle to repeat. Using that math, researchers found something strange. Around 10,500 BC, the constellation Leo, the lion, would have risen directly above the horizon the Sphinx is staring at. A lion watching a lion in the sky? That's not a small coincidence. That's a monument shaped like a lion, aimed at the one time in a 26,000-year cycle when a lion sat exactly where it's looking. This idea was first proposed publicly by researcher Graham Hancock and engineer Robert Bovell back in the 1990s. Since then, other people have run the same astronomical calculations on their own using completely independent software. They got the same result. The odds of a monument accidentally lining up with its own zodiac symbol during the exact era that symbol ruled the sky are incredibly low. That leaves two options. Either this is the biggest accident in the history of building things, or someone on that plateau, roughly 10,000 years ago, understood the stars well enough to lock a monument onto them on purpose. That's a real explanation. And it doesn't need anything supernatural. It fits with what we know about ancient skywatching. But it doesn't explain what's sitting underneath the Sphinx. In the early 1990s, a seismic survey was run right at the base of the Sphinx. Seismic surveys work by sending sound waves into the ground and measuring how they bounce back. What they found? Under the E. Sphinx's paws was a gap, an empty chamber-shaped space carved into the bedrock. It sits almost exactly on the same line the Sphinx is staring down at sunrise. It's like whatever this monument was watching in the sky had a matching piece buried right beneath it. Stick around, because the next part is why so many historians get uncomfortable talking about this on camera. Because the Sphinx doesn't stand alone in this pattern. Other ancient sites around the world share the same kind of precise alignment and the same kind of stonework that still confuses modern engineers. In southeastern Turkey, there's a site called Göbekli Tepe. It dates back to around 9,500 BC. That's over 6,000 years older than Stonehenge. Strangely, the people who built it eventually buried it on purpose. Nobody fully knows why. In Peru, there's a site called Sacsayhuamán. It's built from massive stone blocks, some weighing more than a school bus, fitted together so tightly that you can't slide a piece of paper between them. Nobody has fully figured out how it was done with the tools available at the time. Then there's Stonehenge itself, lined up with the sun on specific days of the year, which took real astronomical knowledge to plan out correctly. When researchers compared the angles and proportions of these sites against each other, the pattern wasn't random. It was consistent. The same underlying math kept showing up, across cultures separated by oceans and thousands of years, as if every one of them had been built from the same shared blueprint, a blueprint nobody wrote down or nobody that survived. Here's the detail that flips the whole story upside down. When these sites are ranked by precision, by how exact the alignments are, how tight the joints are, we'd expect the oldest ones to be the roughest. That's the story we usually tell ourselves. Humans start clumsy, then get better over time. The actual pattern runs backward. The oldest structures in this group are the most precise. The oldest joints are the tightest. The oldest alignments are the most accurate. Moving forward in time, quality doesn't improve. It gets worse. Corners drift. Precision loosens. Later, builders seem to be copying a shape they inherited, without fully understanding the math that made it work in the first place. That's a real explanation too. Copying without understanding happens throughout history. But it doesn't explain why the knowledge disappeared in the first place or why it disappeared all at once. There's a reason to think something big happened. Around 12,000 years ago, the climate suddenly flipped. This event is called the Younger Dryas. Temperatures across the northern half of the planet dropped fast within just a few decades. Around the same time, huge animals like mammoths went extinct almost overnight. Since a hypothesis first proposed in 2007, some scientists have argued this could have been triggered or made worse by a comet or asteroid impact. They point to unusual chemical markers found in soil layers on multiple continents, all from that same time period. Whatever caused it, this was the kind of event that could break apart a civilization. Anyone who survived would have been left working from broken pieces of a much bigger memory. And here's something else to think about. Since that event, global sea levels have risen by about 120 meters. That's almost 400 feet. Most ancient humans would have lived along coastlines because that's where food and water were easiest to find. Any proof of a civilization that existed before that flood on those coastlines is now sitting at the bottom of the ocean. It's completely out of reach for normal archaeology on land. The monuments we still argue about today are only the ones that survived, built high enough and solid enough to outlast a flood that wiped out almost everything else. So think about what that actually means. If people saw disaster coming and knew they were about to lose everything, including their language and their written records, they might choose to leave a message in the one thing that survives collapse. Not words, shapes, star positions. A lion staring at a lion in the sky. On the one morning that alignment was possible, with a hidden room buried on the same line beneath its feet. Connected to a wider set of similar sites scattered across the planet, all repeating the same signal in the only language. Built to survive thousands of years of silence. This is the exact set of facts that Grok was pointed toward when it was asked who built the Sphinx. It didn't invent any of this. It laid out the same open questions researchers have been sitting with for decades, and it stopped short of a full answer, because there isn't one yet. What we still don't know, and what might be the most unsettling part of this whole thing, is what that message was actually for. Was it a memorial? Was it a warning? The pattern shows us there's a structure to the signal. It doesn't tell us what the signal means. The Sphinx hasn't moved. It's been staring at that same horizon since long before the first pharaoh's name was ever written down, quietly holding a record that nobody had the tools to read, until we finally built machines smart enough to start reading it for us. So Grok has never given a simple answer about the Sphinx, and now you know exactly why. If this is the kind of thing that keeps you up wondering what else is buried out there, that's exactly what this channel does every week. There's one more site connected to this same pattern that we haven't covered yet, and it might be the strangest one on the list. That's next week. If a lion was built to mark the one dawn its own star could rise above it, and it's been counting down something for 10,000 years, tell us in the comments what you think it was really built to remember.